Your karma is being written right now, not by what happened to you yesterday, not by the circumstances you were born into, by the quality of attention your mind is bringing to this exact moment. The Buddha was extraordinarily precise about this, and once you understand what he actually meant, the question of how to change your life stops being about your circumstances and starts being about something far more immediate, far more available. Welcome to Mindfulness. In the next few minutes we are going to move through 8 teachings on the relationship between the mind and karma. Not karma as a cosmic reward and punishment system, but karma as the Buddha described it in the earliest recorded teachings, as intention, as the living texture of how your mind meets each moment as it arrives. Each of the 8 lessons builds on the last, and if you stay with all of them, something about the way you see your own mind and your own life may have quietly and permanently shifted by the time we are done. Lesson 1. Karma is not fate, it is intention. Most people carry a misunderstanding about karma their whole lives. They think of it as a cosmic scoreboard, some invisible ledger tracking every wrong turn, ready to settle accounts one day. But that is not what the Buddha taught. In the Anguttara Nikaya, one of the earliest collections of Buddhist teachings, the Buddha said something precise and clarifying. Intention, I tell you, is karma, not the action alone. The intention behind it, the mind state from which the action grew, this changes everything. It means that 2 people can perform the same outward act and create entirely different karma, because the intentions in their hearts were different. A surgeon's knife and a weapon may look the same. What determines the karma is the mind that guided the hand, and it means that karma begins in the invisible place, in what you want, in what you are reaching for, in the quiet motive underneath the surface behavior. Before the words leave your mouth, the karma has already begun forming in the seed of the intention. This is not a comfortable teaching, because it asks you to look somewhere most of us would rather not. Not at what we did, but at why. Not at the surface, but at the root. The good news is this: if karma begins in intention, then the moment your intentions begin to change, your karma begins to change. You do not have to wait for circumstances to be different. You do not need a new situation. You need a different quality of attention toward the intentions already moving in you right now. Notice what you are reaching for today and why. That noticing is already the beginning of something new. Lesson 2. The mind precedes everything. The Dhammapada opens with a teaching so foundational that it was placed first before anything else. Mind is the forerunner of all actions. All deeds are led by mind, created by mind. If one speaks or acts with a troubled mind, suffering follows. If one speaks or acts with a calm and clear mind, happiness follows as a shadow that never departs. This is not poetry. It is an observation about the mechanics of a human life. Your mind does not just respond to your world, it shapes it. The way you habitually think becomes the lens through which you see everything, and then that lens determines what you do, and what you do determines what your life becomes. The chain is unbroken, and it always starts in the same place, in here. Think of someone you know who carries a suspicious mind, always reading threat into neutral situations. Their life fills slowly with conflict, not because the world is unusually hostile to them, but because a suspicious mind finds what it is looking for, and then it acts accordingly. And then the world responds to those actions. Or think of someone who carries a genuinely generous mind. Without effort or strategy, their life fills with warmth and connection, not as a reward from the universe, but simply as the natural fruit of what they have been planting. The Buddha was pointing at something you can verify in your own experience, not asking for belief, only asking you to look at your own mind and notice what it has been building quietly all this time, while you were busy with other things. What has your mind been building today? Lesson 3. Thoughts are not facts, but they become your world. There is a habit the mind has that almost no one questions. It takes a thought and treats it as the truth. A worry arrives and becomes a prediction. A fear arrives and becomes a certainty. A critical voice says, "You are not enough," and is believed without a single piece of evidence. The Buddha taught a practice called in the early stages of meditation, translated roughly as applied thought and sustained examination. The point was to look at thoughts clearly rather than being swept away by them. To see a thought as a mental event, arising and passing, not as a window onto final reality. In the Majjhima Nikaya, the Buddha describes how a monk observing the mind learns to see thoughts simply as thoughts, not to suppress them, not to argue with them, but to recognize them for what they are, mental formations, sankharas, conditioned patterns arising from causes. This is quietly revolutionary for daily life because the moment you can see a thought as a thought rather than as reality, a small gap opens. And in that gap, you are no longer simply the product of whatever the mind generates. You are the one who is aware of it. That awareness is the beginning of freedom. Most of us live entirely inside our thoughts, mistaking the map for the territory. The mind says the world is dangerous, and we close. The mind says we are unloved, and we withdraw. All of this happening automatically, without examination. To change your karma is first to see your thoughts clearly enough to stop treating every one of them as a summons. You are allowed to let a thought pass without obeying it. That small act practiced daily slowly changes the entire direction of a life. Lesson 4. The 3 roots where it all begins. The Buddha identified 3 mental states that he called the roots of unskillful action: greed or lobha, hatred or dosa, and delusion or moha. In Pali, these are sometimes called the 3 poisons, and he was clear that nearly all the suffering a human being creates for themselves and for others grows from one of these 3 roots. Greed here does not only mean wanting money, it is the quality of clinging, of reaching for experience and holding on past its natural end. It is the mind that cannot let a pleasant thing simply be pleasant, but must grasp it, secure it, turn it into a permanent possession. That grasping is where suffering enters through the door of pleasure. Hatred does not only mean violence. It is the quality of aversion, of pushing away, of the low constant friction we hold towards things we do not want to be happening. The traffic, the person who misunderstood us, the way this day is not the day we needed. And delusion is the quiet background of the other 2, the basic misperception that a fixed separate self must be defended and enlarged. From that misperception, the grasping and the aversion follow almost automatically. Here is what makes this personally useful. When you feel suffering arising in your own life, these 3 roots give you a precise place to look, not to judge yourself, but to investigate. Is there clinging here? Is there aversion? Is there a fundamental misunderstanding about what this situation means? The root seen clearly begins to lose its grip. You cannot pull a weed you cannot find. The Buddha was simply handing us a flashlight. Lesson 5. Right thought, the second step on the path. The Buddha's eightfold path is often described as a guide to liberation, but it is equally a practical map for changing the quality of a mind in ordinary daily life. The second factor on that path is most commonly translated as the Buddha described 3 qualities that belong to right intention: the intention of renunciation, moving away from craving; the intention of goodwill, moving away from ill will; and the intention of harmlessness, moving away from cruelty. What is striking is where this sits on the path. Before right speech, before right action, before any outward behavior at all. The Buddha placed the quality of intention ahead of everything we say and do, because he understood that behavior is simply the visible surface of something deeper. Purify the intention, and the behavior begins to follow without force. This is not about suppressing desire or performing goodness for an audience. It is something quieter than that. It is the gradual training of the mind to incline naturally toward what is wholesome. The way a plant inclines toward light, not by effort, but by its own nature, once the conditions are right. In practical terms, this means asking before you speak or act what is actually moving in me right now. Is it genuine care, or is it the need to be right? Is it generosity, or is it the wish to be seen as generous? The question is not meant to paralyze. It is meant to introduce honesty into the gap between impulse and action. That gap is where karma is made or unmade, and the more you practice finding it, the wider it becomes, until one day you realize the reactive life you were living has quietly become a considered one, not perfect. Considered, and that difference changes everything. Lesson 6. Impermanence is not a loss. It is the teaching. There is a word the Buddha returned to throughout his entire teaching life. Anicca, impermanence. Everything that arises, passes. Every state of mind, every circumstance, every feeling, every formation, nothing holds its shape forever. Most people hear this and feel a kind of grief, because we already know it in our bones, yet we spend enormous energy pretending otherwise. We build, we accumulate, we secure, we plan, all of it quietly aimed at making something permanent in a world that refuses to cooperate. But the Buddha did not offer impermanence as a reason for despair. He offered it as a doorway. In the Samyutta Nikaya, the Buddha asks a simple question. If form is impermanent, does it lead to suffering or happiness? And the implied answer is that clinging to what is impermanent creates suffering, not impermanence itself. The clinging. This means suffering is not found in change. It is found in our resistance to change. It is in the part of us that says, this should not be ending. That person should not have left. That time should not be gone. This body should not be aging. We create enormous suffering by arguing with what has already happened and what will inevitably continue to happen. To truly understand impermanence does not mean you stop caring. It means you begin to care more cleanly, to love without the desperate grip of someone terrified of losing, to enjoy a meal, a conversation, or an ordinary evening without the quiet background anxiety of trying to make it last forever. And when applied to the mind itself, impermanence becomes one of the most hopeful teachings of all, because if every state is impermanent, then no darkness is permanent either. The grief will change. The fear will change. Even the habit you are most convinced is simply who you are. That too is subject to anicca. Nothing within you is fixed. Everything within you is still moving. And movement means the possibility of choosing a different direction. Lesson 7. The Brahma Viharas, 4 ways to rewire the heart. If karma begins in the mind, then cultivating specific qualities of mind is not a spiritual luxury. It is some of the most practical work a person can do. The Buddha taught 4 qualities called the Brahma Viharas, sometimes translated as the divine abodes or the immeasurable minds. They are metta, loving kindness, karuna, compassion, mudita, sympathetic joy, and upekkha, equanimity. He taught that these 4 qualities, when cultivated intentionally and practiced regularly, can transform not only how we feel, but the entire karmic texture of our lives. Metta is the sincere wish that all beings be happy, not forced warmth, not polite pleasantness, but a genuine movement of the heart toward the well-being of others. including people we find difficult and including ourselves. The Buddha taught metta meditation as a direct antidote to ill will, not because it suppresses anger, but because it gradually changes the conditions in which anger takes root. In the Metta Sutta, one of the best-known early Buddhist texts, loving-kindness is described as something that can be extended in every direction, without limit, hostility, or ill will. The image given is of a mother protecting her only child. That same quality of unconditional care is extended toward all beings and first cultivated toward oneself. Karuna, compassion, is the natural response of an open heart to suffering. Not pity, which remains at a distance, but a willingness to be genuinely moved by the difficulties of others and to wish that their suffering may be eased. The Buddha taught that compassion without wisdom can become exhaustion, which is why equanimity, the fourth quality, serves as its foundation. Mudita, sympathetic joy, may be the most countercultural of the four in the modern world. It is the ability to feel genuine happiness for the success and well-being of others, not despite your own struggles, but alongside them. Cultivating this quality directly uproots one of the most quietly destructive habits of the mind, measuring your worth against others and suffering because of the comparison. And upekkha, equanimity, is the steady ground beneath the other three. It is not emotional distance or indifference. The Buddha made a careful distinction between equanimity, which remains fully present, and indifference, which simply withdraws. Equanimity is the ability to be moved without being swept away, to feel deeply without losing your footing. What the Brahma Viharas offer in practical terms is this: they are not feelings you wait for spontaneously. They are qualities you train. The way a musician trains with an instrument and a gardener carefully tends the soil. You practice metta, and slowly the mind that naturally returned to irritation begins returning to something gentler. You practice mudita, and the mind that once contracted at another person's good fortune begins to open. You practice upekkha, and the mind that was constantly knocked sideways by circumstances begins to discover a stable ground to which it can return. Together, these four qualities reshape the mind at the level where karma is actually created. Not through grand gestures or dramatic life changes, but through the small, invisible movements of the heart throughout an ordinary day. The moment of irritation that softens before becoming a harsh word. The moment of envy that opens instead of contracting. These moments may be invisible to everyone else, but they are exactly where a life is quietly built or quietly dismantled. The Buddha called these qualities immeasurable because they are not practiced toward a limited group and then stopped. They are expanded outward, first toward yourself, then toward those you love, then toward those you feel neutral about, then toward those you find difficult, and finally without boundaries in every direction. This expansion is itself the practice. Each time you resist the natural contraction of the heart and choose to extend these qualities further, you are doing the deepest work of changing your karma. Lesson 8. The mind that sees clearly is the mind that is free. All 7 lessons before this one have been quietly pointing toward the same place, and this is it. The Buddha's word for wisdom is prajna in Sanskrit and panna in Pali, and he was precise about what wisdom truly means. It is not the accumulation of knowledge. It is not the ability to explain Buddhist doctrine. It is seeing things exactly as they are, clearly recognizing the 3 marks that characterize all conditioned experience: impermanence, anicca, the unsatisfactory nature of clinging, dukkha, and the absence of a fixed, unchanging self, anatta. That final teaching deserves to be approached gently. The teaching of anatta, or not self, is perhaps one of the most subtle and liberating ideas in Buddhist thought. The Buddha was not saying that you do not exist. He was pointing toward something more precise, that what we take to be a fixed, separate and permanent self is actually a flowing collection of processes. Body, feeling, perception, mental formations and consciousness arise together depending on conditions, changing from moment to moment with no solid and unchanging core at the center. This is not a reason for nihilism, it is a reason for profound relief. Because much of the suffering we create comes from defending, enlarging and protecting a self that is far more fluid and open than we have believed. We feel hurt when it is threatened. We grasp at anything that might strengthen it. We become afraid when it seems it could be lost. And all this enormous expenditure of energy is aimed at protecting something that was never quite the solid thing we imagined it to be. When even a small glimpse of this truth is seen clearly, the grip begins to loosen. Not because you have suppressed the self, but because you have seen through the misunderstanding at its root. And that clear seeing is what the Buddha called liberation. Not a place you travel to, not a reward you receive. It is a clarity that arises when the mind finally stops being deceived by its own constructions. In the Majjhima Nikaya, the Buddha uses the image of a raft. The teachings, he explained, are like a raft used to cross a river. Once you have crossed, you do not continue carrying the raft on your head. You set it down. The teachings are not an end in themselves. They are a vehicle for seeing clearly. And once clear seeing arises, the vehicle has completed its purpose. What does this mean for your daily life and for the karma you are creating during ordinary hours? It means that every moment of clear seeing is a moment of freedom, not necessarily a grand awakening that happens in a single afternoon, but a patient accumulation of honest awareness. Seeing a thought simply as a thought, seeing an emotion as a passing pattern of weather, seeing a situation clearly without the distortions of craving or aversion layered over it. None of these moments are small. Each one is the path itself, alive and working in the only place it can work, right here, within you, in this ordinary moment you are living now. You do not need to become a monk. You do not need a teacher sitting across from you. You need only the willingness to look honestly at your own mind, to meet what you discover with curiosity rather than judgment, and to return again and again to clear seeing whenever you drift away. That returning is the practice, and the practice is the path. And the path, walked patiently and honestly, is how the mind changes. And when the mind changes, everything it touches changes with it. Every word, every action, every relationship, and every quiet moment spent alone. This is what the Buddha meant. This is what karma truly is. Not a cosmic ledger, but a living process beginning now in the quality of attention you bring to this single breath. You came here carrying something, a question, a heaviness, or a quiet wish that life could become different. The Buddha's answer was never to look away from it. It was to look more clearly. 8 lessons, 1 direction, inward. The karma of your life is not permanently written in the past. It is being written right now through the quality of mind you bring to this moment. And that may be one of the most hopeful things anyone has ever said. Go gently, go honestly, and begin again as many times as necessary.